Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trump 2.0 Survival and Fightback Tips with the amazing Becky Slack. Hello, Becky. How are you?
Nice to see you, Mark. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I could be better. We both just witnessed the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. How are you feeling?
Slightly terrified. But I think I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in this, although it might be difficult to see it at the moment.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that. You're sort of slightly cheering me up, because I think you can get sucked into it, and we will go into what he said during the inauguration, particularly his speech, but also the reactions to it. You can get sucked into that negative vortex, which I think you and I have been talking about for a long time. But actually, is this a moment of opportunity for those of us on the progressive left who see this as a chance to pin the blame for society's ills where it truly belongs? I mean, that's, I think, how we both see this period for the next 4 years. It's an opportunity, is it not, Becky?
Yes, I think so. I think it's not going to be without hard work, and we're definitely going to have to make sure that we all work together on this if we're really going to make a difference.
Which we're not always good at, are we, on the centre left, Becky? Let's be honest about it.
We're not, and it's a constant frustration of mine. It's just like, come on, let's stop bickering and let's get on with the job.
Yeah. Well, we clearly have a challenge now ahead of us like never before. It's pretty unprecedented. And he laid out, did he not, a program for government, which essentially was what he was saying. To be fair, he was consistent with what he said during the campaign. Pretty terrifying. But there was some stuff in there, be it from I think his first executive order will be to close the border, right through to his economic policy on tariffs and trade. So, to be fair to the guy, I guess that's good for his MAGA base, Becky, that he's trying to deliver his election pledges, which is not always the case.
No, and I think, there was a lot of very simple solutions for some very complex in-ground problems, which, if it was that easy, wouldn't we have done it all already? So it'd be very interesting to see what he actually achieves. But I do think from his speech that he gave that he was very much reminding his voters of why they voted for him. And I think, judging by some of the language that he used around family values and power and strength and rebuilding and making America great again, I think they'll be quite pleased. I think they'll feel like they've got the right man for the job. Yeah,
they're getting a good return on their investment, particularly maybe his billionaire friends that were quite prominent in the audience, who are getting what they paid for, I guess, essentially, which is his rather crazy narrative, implementing it, even if it doesn't actually make America great again.
Yeah. And, if his speech wasn't so terrifying and so full of weird contradictions, like there was parts of it that I actually agreed with.
Wow. He talked about... I'm not sure you're allowed to say that.
No, I think so. I think it's important. We're going to find common ground, Mark.
Of course,
I think, he referred to the fact that the system is broken. And I don't think there was exact words, but that was the inference. And I think that's true. And I think part of the reason why we've got so many people veering to the right is because they also feel like the system is broken and it's not working for them. And I would love to see the left and progressives acknowledge that and say, it's not right. We need to fix it. And this is our achievable vision, achievable plan for the future. And I'd love, we just got to admit when we've messed things up and not done it right.
I agree with you. Because to be fair, the Americans have voted. We're both Democrats. We accept the result, and obviously we wish him and his country well. And he did say some things. You're right. I jotted some of them down. We want to give them back, the American people, the wealth, the power, and democracy. We want to give them that. I think both of us would say absolutely about how you're going to do it, but also we know he's not going to do it, because he and his friends have been the people hollowing it out for the last few decades as they've amassed more and more wealth and power and undermined democracy. Exactly. But as you say, those of us on the progressive left, that's exactly what we should be articulating, because that's exactly where our voters feel disenfranchised, or they feel the system's rigged against them, or they feel that their living standards are flat for year after year, because they are. That's all true. And why is it, Becky, do you think, and I still don't really know the answer, why is it we find it so difficult to admit the failings of post-war society for millions and millions of our voters? Essentially, the system, society isn't working well enough for our people.
Yeah. Or people don't like to admit that they're wrong. They don't like to admit that they've made mistakes. And I think there's a culture, particularly in the UK, within the media, where you're not allowed to make mistakes because you'll be absolutely ripped apart if you do. So I think we've created an environment where we just don't allow people to fail, which I think is part of the problem.
Yeah.
But he also, sorry, Mark, just to finish up on one of the things that I don't want to dwell on what I agreed with, but he also talked about there's a crisis of trust. And I think that's absolutely right. But ironically, that crisis of trust has been fueled by his best mate, Elon Musk. So, like I say, there was so much in there that I kind of felt, if you didn't really follow politics and you were just an ordinary man on the street just trying to get on with life and weren't as obsessed with narrative in the same way that we are, I think you could take quite a lot of positive from it, which in itself is quite scary.
Yeah, and I indeed, it's full of contradictions. My own view is this is day one. This is peak Trump. It's only going to go down from now on because he can't deliver on his promises, and his base will discover that, but independent voters will discover that. Democrats that stayed at home will discover that pretty soon, and I think he could well end up being one of the most unpopular American presidents in history sooner than ever before. But that, of course, doesn't solve the problem in America or indeed anywhere else, because it just reinforces the narrative, which is partly true. The system doesn't work for ordinary people, and you can't trust any of them. And maybe, again, thinking off the top of my head, literally after that inauguration, maybe this is part of the narrative, that they just want to demonstrate democracy doesn't work. So you need to look to other systems, including, the strongman system, that we know some of them actually quite like, and we're seeing that emerge in Europe, or re-emerge in Europe, Becky. That sometimes not winning, not delivering, maybe it's crazy, is actually part of their narrative.
Yeah,
but that's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit like the immigration debate. They need somebody to blame, right? So they need immigrants to keep coming in, otherwise. Who are they going to blame for all of our economic woes and disintegration of society as we know it? Indeed.
So there's so many things that could go wrong. But then I guess this is the reason we wanted to organise this webinar, this podcast, whatever you want to call it. And I think we want to do more of these, Becky, is to give people hope that this is the start of the fight back. We want to share some tips on how to cope, and I think that's incredibly important because a lot of people are traumatized by this, and that trauma is just going to grow. But also, how do we fight back? Because we can't just we can't bury our head in the sands, and we certainly can't just passively accept all this. And it's quite terrifying. I've been listening to some other podcasts and interviews, and even eminent organizations like the BBC putting on experts who say, well, maybe if Trump threatens tariffs, we could negotiate with him and offer him things. I'm pretty terrified that almost we're kneeling down to pray to this godlike figure, this guru type figure, because he might threaten us, and that's the mindset I think we've got to really walk away from, reject and critique, because you don't deal with the threat of tariffs by offering something.
No. I was always taught to
mainstream media.
Yeah. I don't know. I was taught to stand up to bullies. I don't know how to counter the tariff threat. That's not my area of expertise. But what I do know is that there are lots and lots of organisations and individuals who are having conversations similar to this one. So I don't think we're on our own in thinking about this, which is great because, we all need to come together and work cooperatively and productively together on this. Like before Christmas, I was at the Solidar Silver Rose event, the Silver Rose Awards, and that was a room full of people who think very much like we do. I was at various conferences and other networking events before Christmas, and all the conversation was pretty much in the same direction. It's like, okay, like this is the situation that we're in. how do we work together, and how do we use all of our skills and expertise and all the love and kindness that we've got in order to counter some of these harmful narratives that are coming out of the mouths of Trump and all of his mates.
Indeed, and I think that's one inspiring thing is going to events like organised by Solidar. And it's interesting, actually, one of the words that I think we've got to start using a lot more is solidarity. That we know is the complete opposite of Trump. That we believe in actually working together, but helping each other. That people in need our help. We don't want charity. We want to support each other because that's what we want to do. But I mean, in terms of maybe moving on to some of because I mean, the good or the bad thing about being living in Europe and on the continent and in the UK and elsewhere is that to some extent we've already had our Trumps. We've had our Brexit vote. We've had our Boris Johnsons. We've had Orbán in Hungary. You know, I mean, America have had Trump already. They got Trump 2.0, but we've been living through this, this drift to the far right now for a decade, more than a decade. Maybe you could say trace it back to 2 or 3 decades. I mean, that also should give us a bit of hope that we have learned from that. We haven't learned enough from it, but there are the election of the Labour government in the UK. We shouldn't take for granted. You know, that was the result of a lot of work, winning back confidence, reclaiming the narrative, and getting electable and offering hope to people. We know they are struggling because it's a daunting task to turn around a country that's been neglected for 14 years. But there are things we can learn from Europe, and I think that gives me hope as well. That America, as you say, what's going on there is sadly a global phenomena. But we have lessons to learn which we can share with our American friends, and they are not alone either. I think that's one thing we want to signal, so that we are in solidarity with our American friends. I've got family there. Many of the people watching probably also have friends and family there. I'm sure you do too. You know, I think one thing we can signal to them is they are not alone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for me is one of the things that we have to do. And it's not just about working together with people who think like us, because that's quite easy. I think it's about also finding common ground with people who we might traditionally disagree with, but actually, you know, if we actually had a conversation and listened to people's concerns and their worries, actually we might find that they're not too different to us, and that actually we can find a way to work together on some of these issues without feeling even further right.
And that was so I've got a list of tips and advice that we can share, some of them today, but also on future broadcasts, because there's a lot of them, which is good, isn't it? You know, hopefully our viewers that are watching this will send us their ideas as well. But one of the things is getting out of our bubble, moving away from behind the screen, getting off social media and start talking to one another again, even people outside your own little friendship circle that you don't necessarily know or even agree with. Like, start finding common ground, because my experience over the years is when often I speak to people in various diverse backgrounds, I know it's a cliche, but we have far more in common than divides us. And I talk to a lot of people in business. They don't like a divided society either. They don't want oligarchs and billionaires sucking up all the wealth and opportunity and rigging the market. They want a fair system with fair rewards for people who work hard, but also looking after those that can't look after themselves. That's what most people want. But I agree, we've got to start having those conversations to people that are outside our immediate circle, and get off social media at least sometimes.
Not just yet.
Not just yet. Stay with us for a few more minutes.
And I think also sometimes that's about being kind to people that we don't like, and that can be quite hard, particularly in this kind of cancel culture war environment that we live in at the moment. It's very easy to kind of, we want to shut people up and deplatform them and turn off their mics or whatever. But actually, I think if we actually spend a bit more time listening and paying attention to what their actual concerns are, they might be not articulating them in the same way that we might do, and we might not even agree with all of what they say, but I think a little bit of kindness would go a long way at the moment.
And certainly in my life, I've always been amazed by the kindness of strangers to me, that people have looked after me when I've needed help from most unexpected quarters, and we ought to return that as well without needing to be thanked for doing it. It should just be instinctive. I mean, one of the measures to me of a civilized society is homelessness, for example. And I think again we've stood back for too long now just to allow it to happen, allow it to get worse. We know the housing crisis is just going to get worse. Homelessness is going to get worse. we've got to surely be able to develop deliverable, not slogans, but policies to, for example, deal with homelessness once and for all within not a generation, but like within a year or two. And I know some countries like Finland, for example, and others are trying to do exactly that. But this is where I think we've got to reclaim the ground from the populist right, that we don't just want to blame the migrants. We want to solve problems by tackling the real causes of things like homelessness and the difficulties that young people have in even getting a deposit to get on the housing ladder. So they are the victims of landlords with short-term rental agreements and all the things that go with that. That these are the areas I think we on the progressive left need to refocus on.
Absolutely. And doing a lot of work in civil society, I see these activities going on. There are solutions out there. World Habitat have just done their Habitat Awards, where they've given out awards to really exciting and innovative housing schemes around the world. And there's some really fantastic examples in there that they're now looking to transfer to other countries to try and tackle homelessness and issues around housing caused by climate change or discrimination in society, and it's having a tremendous effect, but people don't know about them and people aren't willing to fund them. And that's part of the problem, is where's the investment coming from for this? There's got to be a political will to start funding some more radical and unusual ideas, which
and that's exactly right. I mean, you know, we can't shy away from policy. Policy change needs to happen. We need to take some deep looks at ourselves, that we haven't been radical enough. But you can be radical and pragmatic and believe in efficiency, for example. They can all go together, and be pro-business. Indeed, we would argue that's the most pro-business thing to do. So, and you know, I bang on about the billionaires and the oligarchs, but they are sucking up. They're not generating wealth. They're just very good at sucking it up. And I'm talking about not millions, but billions and billions. And we've shied away from that issue because we know progressive taxation isn't easy. But I think we've got to increasingly focus on. I mean, every year people like Oxfam and Amnesty International and others produce lots of data, lots of figures showing the 1% is now absorbing 50, 60, 70% of all the wealth created every year. And of course, a minuscule part of that 1% is sucking up even more. And that's where the money and the wealth and the income and the opportunities are going. And we have to have a conversation about that, because you can't fund the housing or fund the tackling of the housing crisis without the investment. And we can't rely on charity. I mean, these people have got a lot of money. I'm afraid they have an obligation to reinvest some of that money back in the system that has given them that money.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think also, if you are making billions, I mean, I'm all for healthy competition and for people to make money, but you've got to lift other people up with you at the same time. And if you're making billions off of the skills and the hard work and energy of other people, then it's only right that they are compensated fairly for that. And I think, you know, people like Musk and Jeff Bezos, I mean, they've got so much money, it wouldn't actually make much of a dent in their pockets for them to distribute some of their wealth a little bit.
And some of them, Bill Gates does give it back, but he should be left to chance, or the fact he's a good man or not a good man, whatever, you know, not for me to judge, but, you know, it should be institutionalized in the system. I mean, personally, how many billions do you need? Surely when you get to the first billion, can't you sort of just settle with that? I don't know. You know, maybe we'll find out one day, Becky.
Yeah. And I don't know. And it feels like there's something very wrong with the taxation system that enables that to happen. And then, you know,
how do you amass a billion? Yeah. And then it's left to ordinary folk to pay their taxes to support the health service and to, you know, fill the potholes on the roads. So I don't know. There's something very skewed about that. Yeah, so we've got to have a conversation. I think that's on my list. Conversation about fairer, more progressive taxation, closing tax loopholes, of also just asking that question: how is it that a few are amassing vast wealth and income, and I think that's now extending to power, because they're using this money to buy the political system, whilst most people's standards of living across Europe have flatlined now for over a decade or more. I mean, that is not sustainable. And I think that point about them now buying power, where Musk basically threatening to buy the UK government, he's going to bung, not Farage now, he's going to replace Farage apparently, fund reform 200 million and buy the election, which maybe you could, because you probably would drown the system in money and campaign funds in a way we've never seen before. And of course, he's threatening to do that elsewhere as well. You know, his intervention in Germany. I mean, when the oligarchs start using their wealth in that way, surely they've crossed a line. And again, I think we can't just criticize it. We have to take action against it. And get braver and bolder, and as you say, build alliances, talk to other people that agree with us that aren't necessary in our political family or in our community.
Yeah, definitely. How we go about that is a challenge for this year. And actually, there's a few people that I've been talking to that may have some ideas that I'm hoping may come along and join us on one of these.
I think one of the plans this year is to do more of this. Hopefully people watching will like this and share it and tell us what they think, and comment in the comment section above or below. But we do want to get more people involved in this this concept we have. I mean, you know, you and I, I'm sure we will, before we go, just reel off a few other practical tips for coping with Trump 2.0 for the next 4 years or so, if he lasts 4 years. But we do want to get other people involved in this broadcast, in this concept, to build those alliances, build that, strengthen and build that community, because certainly we can't do it on our own. But I think you and I feel you've got to do something. We can't just sit back at home and moan about it. You and I and many others are determined to use this as an opportunity to present an alternative vision that actually tackles the root causes of the injustices in society, which is not a small racial minority, and I think they've been blamed before historically, but is the systemic failure of our economic and social system.
Yeah.
We've got to find a way, Becky, this is where you come in, of explaining that to people in a way that they can understand, rather than the way I, as an economist, speak.
Yes, well, and it's not an easy job, because everybody comes to this with their own perspectives, their own life experiences, their own understanding of the world, and it's about trying to find a narrative that that meets the frames that they hold in their minds, without reinforcing the language of the opposition, and in a way that gives them hope and confidence that we can actually do this. So I've got a few ideas.
Great. You go first, and then I'll have a go, and then we'll wrap this up, and look forward to hearing ideas from everyone watching as to what they will be doing in the next few weeks and months to not just survive but fight back.
Absolutely. So just three. I mean, there's 100 different things that I could talk about, but I don't want to spend all night. So the three are: the first is that we can't communicate our way out of bad policy. So we kind of touched upon this, but you know, we need policies that actually work for people and that they can believe in and that actually deliver for them. There's one thing promising stuff to people and then actually delivering it is completely different. So I think we need to admit the current system isn't working. And in fact, actually, I was talking to somebody earlier about this, and they said, is Trump a disruptor of a system that works, or is he the result of a system that's broken? And I suspect possibly the latter. And so I think, you know, having a think about the current system, admitting what doesn't work, figuring out what does work and doing more of it, having an achievable plan for change, and then really communicating that vision powerfully in a way that brings people with you in language that resonates with ordinary people. So let's ditch the jargon, ditch the technical language.
It's going to be tough for me, Becky. That's just me. Yeah. But you're so right.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, I think we need to ditch identity politics and culture wars, because I think it creates more division. It contributes to polarization. It contributes to the othering of people, which, as we know, the far right feed on that. And that's even things like, you know, the ED&I policies. I mean, you know, I want the world to be more equal and just, because I know that it benefits everybody. It's not just about, you know, if we put a woman in a leadership role, it's good for the woman. Well, actually, it's good for everybody. But we don't do enough to communicate that message. And then that can give people the wrong impression that it's just a tick box exercise and it's not being done on merit, which in turn can then create resentment and a lack of support for these types of initiatives. So there's something around ditching identity politics and the culture wars, and actually focusing on what we've got in common, which brings me on to my final point, which we've kind of touched upon, and that's I think the phrase is radical empathy, where we find common ground with others, including those that we don't like and that we don't necessarily agree with on 100% of what they say, but even if it's 50%, that's still a good base that we can work on. And it means being kind. It means listening to people and not belittling other people's concerns. Because again, I think the left sometimes has a tendency to do that. We scoff at people who don't think the same way that we do, and we, thinking about Brexit, and lots of my friends have called people who voted for Brexit stupid and idiots, and they don't know what they're doing, and, they're lacking in intelligence. And actually, maybe that's not it. I mean, I'm sure it is in some instances, but in a lot of cases, it was just people who thought that was what was needed in order to address the concerns that they had. So I think listening and trying to really understand other people's perspectives is going to be key. It's going to be hard sometimes, particularly when you're frustrated with the other person. But I think it's going to be
and we've all got to admit that we've all done that, as you say, in the past, and we've got to learn from that. That doesn't work. That just alienates the very people that we're trying to work with. And in some cases, we need their support. And as you say, we actually all want the same thing. Yeah. So you got three very inspiring, very practical ideas there that we need to flesh out over the next few weeks and months, and indeed implement what we can. I think some of them we get on with immediately. I'm going to have a go with three as well, and stay with me on this one. First one's going to be a bit challenging. You said no jargon, and I did say no jargon.
Are we going to have a jargon jar where your goes in every time?
You know what I'm like, and I'm going to start with philosophy, and I'm going to start off with Marcus Aurelius and Fabius Maximus. I'm sorry, but stay with me. It is relevant. Fabius Maximus really inspired the Fabian Society, and this Roman dictator, as he was actually, a Roman general, but you can learn a lot from his tactics. And it wasn't just waiting, it was choosing your moment, using your time to build up your counter arguments for the counter attack. So just like the Fabian Society tackled awful, terrible poverty in the 19th century through these tactics. And I still think they've never really been given the proper credit they deserve for what they did for fighting for social justice, which that fight continues. That we can be inspired by Fabius Maximus. And the other one is Marcus Aurelius, who basically developed the concept of Stoicism, which has a terrible reputation. It isn't just about a stiff upper lip. It's about being moderate, that's true, and being wise, but also courageous and fighting for justice. Because I do think we need to underpin our politics and our actions with values. And that to me is really what it's a fair society, but we want to be people driven by values like justice, like wisdom, like moderation, and like courage, to give everyone a feeling of community, essentially, and talk more about philosophy, if I may, but make it real and relevant so we can learn. The famous joke, what did the Romans ever do for us, Becky? Well, there's a couple of ideas there we can learn from the Romans. Second one is that
Monty Python sketch.
We can do the Monty Python sketches on the next one. I'll have a go. I'll have a go. There's a lot of material there. That's very much my era, so we can have a go. The other one is that community link. That we've got to get out from behind the screen and start talking to people. I mean, I remember as a young politician many decades ago, the most powerful thing I did. And even back in the day, it wasn't done anywhere near as much as people said it was knocking on the door of people and saying, I'm from, in my case, the Labour Party. How can I help you? And people were like, one, no one's ever knocked on the door before, or except for elections when they want something. And no one certainly ever asked, how can I help you? And I think that is the good way that politics could restore its credibility and trust. If we stop just knocking on doors in elections or ringing people up or emailing them, and email them and contact them and knock on the door preferably, or speak in the street with a street stand outside of election periods, because and say our true value here and our true role is not just to get elected, but is to help you. So to return politics to the people through the community. So that would be something I urge everyone to do, and join a political party. Doesn't really matter which one. Well, maybe not Reform, but doesn't matter which one. Get involved in politics and try and practice what I'm preaching, which is get the politicians back on the doorstep. And the third one, which I feel really passionate about. I mean, we all know we need a mixed economy. That's the way society is geared, but we don't want it rigged in favor of a few. And I'm a great believer in giving everyone a chance to be an entrepreneur. But I know from personal experience, many young people from modest or poor backgrounds, or even middle-class backgrounds, don't really get a chance to become an entrepreneur. They're not given the training, the support, or the resources. The system is rigged against them. And there's a lot of potential entrepreneurship in the UK, Europe, across the world, but young people just feel the system's rigged against them because it is. And I think on that one, we should basically say to the billionaires, sorry, mate, game up. You've got to start funding the next generation of entrepreneurs. Don't keep the power, the wealth, and the money to yourself. We need it to give that new generation the chances. We've talked about housing already, but I think entrepreneurship is probably the next area we need to tackle as the progressive left. We're not just the party or political activists to represent the state or public services, important though they are. We should be champions of making sure the market is truly free and open and accessible to everyone, and entrepreneurs can come from whatever background, irrespective of their background. They should be supported to become successful entrepreneurs. Anyway, I'll shut up there. 3 ideas. I've got so many more.
No, exactly. And there's loads that I really want to say about your ideas as well, but let's save it for another time, because the idea of social mobility and giving opportunity to young people from all types of backgrounds is something that I feel really...
But don't you think you're almost empowered? It's already having the effect that this is the Trump effect 2.0, that we're not burying ourselves in the sand or finding a dark hole to hide in for the next 4 years. We're actually coming out fighting with ideas, critiquing ourselves, being open to new ideas too, and maybe, yes, like you say, speaking to people from other parties or none, to take on the values that Trump is projecting, will be imposing on us, which are about what? Greed, division.
Although actually, I mean, this brings us neatly back to his inauguration speech, and and I made notes about the values that he was talking about, and he talked about family values a lot. He talked about power and strength and rebuilding things, which I don't know, I just kind of feel like it's going to tap into a lot of I think there's people who are going to think that they share the same values.
And I mean, even quoting Martin Luther King, that making his dream is a reality. I mean, we can't disagree with that, but I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Stealing the left's narratives,
but
them against us.
But he's got to deliver, and we've got to hold him to account, like we've got to hold the populist right to account in Europe. I mean, just as Boris and others failed with Brexit, Brexit, remember, was going to solve all the problems in the UK. I don't really think any of them now really want to be reminded of that claim, and I'm sure this is true with Trump 2.0.
Yes, well, let's see. But look, I'm looking forward to this next lot of events that we've got coming up. I think we've got some interesting people to speak to, details to be announced in June. I'm
looking forward to you revealing the names and the details over the next few days, Becky. I think we're planning to do this again on the 20th of Feb, if I'm right. So 1 month into Trump's 2.0 term. How is he getting on? We'll do a fair and objective assessment, I'm sure.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if people want to send us their ideas of practical ways in which we can get through the next 4 years, then as long as they're polite, obviously, then I would love to hear them. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Everybody. Good to see you, Mark. See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.